Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm today a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. In this video, we're going to look at something a little interesting. So this is Disney's The Princess and the Frog. So why am I doing this now? Because there's food involved, at least in the film. So the film is based off a book. It is a traditional fairy tale, but it's primarily based off this book by E.D. Baker. And the book tells the story of a princess by the name of Anna, who basically isn't really loved. She has a donkey laugh and isn't really loved by anybody else but her aunt. And she goes off. She's basically being told, you need to marry, you're going to be marrying this prince who she hates. And so she goes off into the woods, runs into another prince who's basically been cursed to be a frog, kisses him, and then turns into a frog herself. And then they go on various adventures, first trying to figure out how to cease to be a frog, trying to find the witch that turned him into a frog, run into another witch, have a bit of an adventure, being captured, escape him, get to her aunt, who explains, oh yeah, you were wearing this bracelet I gave you that protects you from curses. So now you have to go back and get it and then kiss him again, which eventually they do. And then they turn back into a human. That's the basic of that story. Now, that's what this is based on. Now, what's important about this is traditional Disney, at least Disney film-wise. So it was directed by Ron Clements and John Musker, who were also known for doing things like the Beauty and the Beast and the Little Mermaid. So this is a traditional Disney musical, animated musical, done in the same vein of the Disney Renaissance films. So it works very much like a Broadway musical in its formula. So that's where this sits. It is also the first African-American Disney princess. But as you remember about the original story, she spends the majority of this film as a frog. We'll get into that. So, the voices in this one, the voice of our main character, and I'll scroll down, of Tanya, is Anika Noni Rose, who is a voice actress, and an African-American actress. Oprah Winfrey plays Endora, which I believe is the mother. And then you had a few other. The prince, whose name is Naveen, is played by Bruno Campos, who's done a variety of TV stuff. So, and you have a variety of other people. The little white girl in this film is actually voiced by an African-American woman. The majority of the cast are in fact black, with the exception of John Goodman, who plays Big Daddy, the father of the main character. Not the main character, but the little white girl. So let's get into the basis of this story. So, at the beginning of the story, you have Titania and her mother, who's a seamstress. And her mother is creating a dress for this little girl by the name of Charlotte. And Titania is with her mother. And she's telling her the story of basically the frog princess, or I think it might be the frog prince, where basically the princess kisses a frog and he turns into a prince. And Charlotte's like, I will kiss any frog I want. And Titania's like, no, not in a million years. And then they leave. And Titania and her mother go back to their home. Now this takes place in New Orleans. The beginning takes place early on. The rest of the film takes place in 1926. I believe this actually happens the prologue happens in 1912. So they go home, interact with her father, and Tanya, it's Titania, mispronouncing these things, is a very good chef, so she's making gumbo. And they live in the poorer area outside of New Orleans. And she makes this perfect gumbo, and they invite everybody over. And her father very much impresses on her that it's family that's important, because they have a dream of creating their own restaurant. You jump forward into the 1920s. She's an adult. She's working as a waitress. Basically, she comes home, not a lot of tips. You see that she has jars and jars of money that she's trying to save. Plops down on her bed and then goes back to work. And she works two jobs. She works very, very hard, trying to make this dream come true. And into town comes this prince. Now Charlotte's still involved. They're the same age. She's still this spoiled little rich girl. And she does this whole, it's around Mardi Gras. And she wants to do the whole masquerade and interact with this prince. Now in stops our villain. What's our villain's name? Tentatively. The villain in this story, whose name I can't remember. Let's see, what is his name? Dr. Felsier. So, he's very into voodoo. I'll get to my complaints about this later. He's into voodoo. He convinces the prince, who's been essentially disowned because he's being obnoxious and being a womanizer and just kind of being a brat. And his parents have essentially disowned him. And he's from a fictional country and sounds very, very French. So his assistant is convinced by this voodoo doctor to essentially turn his master into a frog and take his place in his body and marry this princess and convince her to basically, then the voodoo guy is going to kill her father and basically run all of New Orleans. And again, he owes a lot of things to these voodoo gods. Again, issues. Moving on. So this is what happens, and then Titania, who she was planning on buying this old warehouse and turning it into a restaurant, and then the people who were selling it, who had already kind of said she was going to be able to buy it from them, said, "Oh, but this person came along and decided to pay full price for this." And so she's depressed and unhappy, and eventually ends up kissing the frog, our dear prince, and then turning into a frog herself. And so, of course, they hop off, and they have to basically try to figure out how to cease to be frogs, and they end up being basically thrown into the swamp because, again, they're not supposed to be able to be found. And there's a bunch of musicals and more songs going on, and eventually they get to a good voodoo person, and she basically gives a whole new song. Basically, you have to find what you're lacking, essentially, inside yourself. So, in the case of our main character, she has to realize that love is important besides, working very, very hard for her dreams. And of course, the prince, as is usual with these princes, similar to Beauty and the Beast, is he has to realize he's in love with a human being and not being a womanizer. So, again, you had all this musical where they're kind of basically told, this is what will break the curse. They get back to New Orleans. There's a whole bunch of climax issues where supposedly he actually has to be kissed by a princess, which again is why he wanted our main character to kiss him, because she was dressed like a princess because Mardi Gras. And essentially he gets captured, and the token, the amulet that his imposter is wearing gets off, and he turns into the spoiled little fat man that he is. And of course, our Charlotte doesn't want to kiss him. It's like, what the heck, you're not the prince anymore. And then Titania gets a hold of it, and she's still frog, and gets into, I'm guessing, St. Louis Cemetery number 1. That's where Marie Laveau's tomb is, though obviously this is before that, I think. But again, it's the old cemetery. And she's gonna break it, and then our villain tries to convince her. It's like, you don't want to do this. I can give you everything. I can give you the restaurant. I can give you your riches. And then she remembers what her father wants, which was that he had family. And then eventually she breaks it, and he's taken away by the voodoo people, by the voodoo gods. Again, the issues. She's able to get back, and admits that she loves him. The two frogs fall in love, but it's before, basically, it strikes midnight before Charlotte, who was the princess of Mardi Gras, is able to kiss him, so they stay frogs. And instead, it's like, okay, we're going to accept we're going to be frogs from now on, even though, of course, people know who they are. They go off and they get married, and once they're made man and wife, even though again they're frogs, they kiss because now she's a princess because they're married. They turn back into human again and live happily ever after, and she opens a restaurant. Okay, so issues. As a film, this is fantastic. It definitely follows the Disney Renaissance formula. So the music is great, the flow is great, everything works fine. My issues with it, and I say this as a white person, the first African American princess spent the majority of her film as a frog. That's my main issue. They couldn't have picked another story. Two, they get some inaccuracies when it comes to New Orleans. One of the big things that I point out by the IMDb page, Charlotte, being a white person, would not be going under to the prince. Again, the name here. Naveen is not white. He's definitely white. He's more Caribbean, not really Caribbean. The guy who's used the voice actor is Brazilian. The character is definitely presented as more of a Southern European. So his skin is a little more olive toned. So that would be considered interracial marriage in the 1920s. So yes, Charlotte would never have any dreams of marrying this guy because he's not white. So that's one thing. They also show a lot of whites and blacks interacting on a social level, which probably wasn't quite happening quite as much in the 1920s because segregation and Jim Crow laws. And yes, even though this was in New Orleans, this is the Deep South. Things do not change. It's still the bloody Deep South. So there's that as well. But it's the fact that the first African American Disney princess spends the majority of this film as a frog, which I don't particularly like. And the other, I'm not particularly fond of this entire message thing where, yes, falling in love is important, but it almost discredits her hard work. She's working 2 jobs, and that seems like it doesn't mean anything. Her hard work does not actually pay off. She has to fall in love and find a prince in order for things to happen, which again is traditional Disney fairy tales. But this film came out in 2009. You think you can update things just a little bit, but it's Disney. So on top of the fact that the other thing I think would make more sense, he's a prince. Why on earth would she not take his now princess back to his country rather than, staying in extremely racist New Orleans? I mean, there's no logic there. But again, it's a weird fairy tale. Not to mention, technically, in most of the Disney fairy tales, you go off with the prince to his land. That's normally what you do because she's now a princess, rather than now she's, let's get married and now we're going to run a restaurant in extremely racist New Orleans. Yeah, no. It's also a very, very dreamy view of New Orleans. I've been to New Orleans. It's dirty. It's smelly. This is in fact the French Quarter. Maybe it was because I was pregnant, but I was not particularly fond of New Orleans. So this gives a very rosy, clean look of New Orleans when I don't think it was even that in the 1920s. So they specifically, and yes, I can criticize this because they make a point of putting it in a specific place in a specific time, as opposed to pretty much all of the other Disney fairy tales. They make it as, yes, it's probably Europe, but it's really ambiguous. It's supposed to be ambiguous. This is not ambiguous, and this was a choice. They pick a specific time period with a specific aesthetic. They have newspaper articles talking about the time, and apparently they get it wrong. There is no full moon going around in Mardi Gras, because if you're not familiar with where Easter works, at least for Protestant countries, Easter happens after the first full moon in spring. And Mardi Gras happens before that. So typically Mardi Gras happens around the time of a new moon. So there's no full moon going around. So, but again, I'm able to criticize this because they make a point of this. They have newspaper dates specifically dating when the heck this is. And they get it wrong, and they can't even get the details correct. Yes, I know it's a Disney film, but still, if you're going to be, it's better off that you be ambiguous than screw things up, because the parents are going to notice. And kids aren't stupid. So they're going to come research maybe some of this, look at some of the styles, and African American families are possibly going to be somewhat offended, but it's Disney, and they're totally hopeful that it's a Disney princess. Let's see. Because it's Disney, it is rated at IMDb as a 7.1, which is, it's not bad. Again, it's mostly an African American cast. The producers are white because Disney. The prince is Brazilian and grew up in a variety of places, including Toronto. So, some people are from New Orleans. Again, it has Oprah Winfrey in it, and I'm not an Oprah Winfrey fan. Let's see. I recognize various other people. Yawning. I'm a toddler. I'm always tired. But yeah, it's, even as a white person, I find issues with this. And again, they could have picked a film where the African American princess is, African American for the majority of the film rather than a frog. So, and yes, the original title of this book would have been The Frog Princess, but apparently they didn't want to be offending the African American community, so they named it The Princess and the Frog. And again, I still think it's offensive that the princess remains a frog for the majority of this film. They could have done The Frog Prince, where she's where, he's a frog for the majority of the film, and she's still a princess. So, but overall, this is a decent film. It fits with the Disney Renaissance formula, so it's good no matter what. It is a Disney musical film. It's done by people who know what the heck they're doing. Obviously, they did The Little Mermaid, among other things. I don't know really what else these guys did. And yes, it is my preferred form of animation. Yes, he did Aladdin and Moana. I haven't seen that yet. It might have issues. Probably has issues. But again, he was part of Disney's Renaissance, so they know what the heck they're doing. I think the other guy did something similar. He's known for the similar things. Yeah, pretty much the exact same stuff in The Little Mermaid and Aladdin, and they know what the heck they're doing. And the animation is very similar. So, as a film, this is fantastic. Even as a white person, I see the issues. So, not to mention she becomes a princess by kissing a prince, and then it never really gets a kingdom. She gets a restaurant. Yes, I know that's her dream, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. She doesn't get her castle and her crown. So, which kind of bugs me. So, but Disney. Being inclusive is not Disney's thing. Please see my following videos, I believe, next month on Mulan issues. But, alright, that is it for this review. I'm going to stop ranting and raving about a Disney film that I watched as an adult. And yes, it's the first real Disney film that I've watched in a very long time. And I'm not the target audience. I'm really not. I'm not a little girl anymore. And I have issues. Yes, I will probably cover some more Disney films because as much as I hate Disney, you can't get rid of it. It's not going away. So, will I show this to my child? Maybe. Maybe. I'm not sure yet. Are they creating a live action? I don't know. That might cause issues. This is a little bit more recent, so I don't know. Apparently, as of this filming, this is being filmed in August, they're redoing a live action of the Little Mermaid. I'm afraid. As you all, we definitely be afraid. Considering the messes they've made. I doubt this is going to be any better. But again, that's the end of this review. If you liked what you see, check out what else I've got. I do a lot of children's books, a lot of family films, not all Disney. I do a sprinkling of secular homeschooling videos, some travel stuff, and a variety of other, sometimes it's heavier, mostly it's light children's picture books and family films. But check out what I've got, like and subscribe, and check out more of what's coming. Thank you.